what we'll do is we'll dive right in. And I think we should start with the first question that came to us about measurement. Stephen, why don't you kick off sharing your thoughts on measurement on CTV, like where it used to be, where it is today, and where you think it's going?
Yeah, you mean, and I think it's when you're talking about measurement on CTV, I think it ties directly to outcomes, right? Because in terms of measurement, I mean, what is the common measurement factor? Is it impressions? I know there's been a lot of challenge for traditional TV buyers to move out of a gross rating point mindset on TV to an impression comparable metric on connected TV. And I think that we've done a lot of work, and again, this isn't a plug, but talking to people in the industry, like, what is the success of a connected TV campaign? And is it an awareness campaign that's simply volume? If you look at frequency and reach and trying to reach as many households as possible, is it, I mean, there's a lot of talk in the space now around connected TV becoming a performance marketing machine, and that gets you deeper into the funnel on obviously awareness, attention, all those things are important, but are people coming to the website? Are people buying shoes? What are the metrics on that? So I feel like that wasn't like a super satisfying answer, but I mean, I feel like measurement and outcomes and all that is tied together. And I feel like most people from a general media buying standpoint now at least are looking at things from a digital mindset, which has been a long evolution.
We just noticed that a lot of people are getting very confused by the sort of the umbrella term measurement. And so we see it as being two separate things, which you can see here, right? KPIs and objectives. KPIs, and both of these are forms of measurement, but they need to be treated in our minds separately and distinctly as you define like your campaign goals and success. And so hopefully this helps a little bit. It speaks to what Stephen was just saying about, whether or not you're looking for performance as measurement, or you're looking at completion rates or CPVC. That should really just be looked at as delivery. But the way that we would argue the industry is going is success shouldn't be about simply delivering the campaign in full. That should just be the basic measurement for knowing that your dollars are being spent the right way. But success, when it comes to measurement, depends on what it is you're looking to do. So when we talk to our clients ahead of a campaign, when we're having a creative call with them, we say, what is it you actually want to achieve? Is this just an awareness campaign, which is now beginning to become less and less the highlight of what people want to achieve? Is it about education? Is it about preference, favorability? Is it even about just creating a perception of being more innovative? Like, these are objectives, and those should also be measured from a success-based sort of standing. How would you suggest that people were asking, or looking into that and measuring it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different angles. I mean, for me, it's always, if you look at measurement, it's what people say versus what people do, right? So we come across partners in the space, and disclaimer, they're a partner of ours. We're a big fan of T-Vision. Say the panel, they have measurement at that big screen, the largest primary screen in the household, and they're really understanding eye tracking. So again, just because our whole thing that we always talk about, and I feel like I have to say all the time, is like impressions aren't created equal. On one end of the spectrum, you have people not even in the room and an impression's running. And then in another situation, someone's on the edge of their seat paying attention. And we've looked at a lot of data studies too, that 60 to 80% of people in the living room, their eyes aren't even on the screen, right? They're on a second device or doing something else and watching TV in a very passive manner. And if you're a performance marketer and looking at impressions and return on sales, like if people aren't paying attention, they're not going to engage or interact or sort of execute based on seeing an ad. So I think there's the panel-based measurement companies like T-Vision. There are survey-based companies like LoopMe and Lucid to really understand brand recall. Are you kind of breaking through the noise on CTV? And then there are a handful of other companies that are going to measure exposures on CTV to engagements on website to action. So I think our approach has always been not specific to Origin, but when we talk to clients is approaching it from all angles. And if you're okay, I'd love to, I noticed Will from Sports Radar is on here, and he is one of my favorite people in the space because of his passion about supply. And I would argue, and hopefully this is a seamless transition, that all of this, doesn't work if you're running on shitty supply, right? And if you look at the commoditization of supply on CTV, everyone has access to the same supply, so it becomes a price conversation, not a performance conversation. And again, if you're not starting from a clean slate of reputable sort of quality supply, where you know the context, know where you're running, I mean, you can't expect to have a successful campaign. So I certainly don't want to put you on the spot, but Will, we'd love to have you, if you're interested, come up on stage with us here and talk about supply quality a little bit. So if you're interested, send a note or raise your hand or do something to get our attention. And if, oh, all right. So I'm gonna.
Are you going to promote? You're going to promote Will?
I'm going to promote you. Is to ask you for your social security number and Bitcoin exchange ID. And once you enter those and we drain your accounts, you'll be allowed on stage. So just make sure you enter that information.
We said no to Bitcoin, dude.
Oh, no Bitcoin. Sorry.
Yeah.
Credit card or PayPal.
Exactly. Hi, Will. You might need to unmute yourself, and please, if you want, turn on your video. But welcome on up.
Hello.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Oh, you know, rocking and rolling, it never stops in this game, right?
Oh my God, I almost wore that shirt. How weird was that going to be?
Yeah, the only difference, you know, here in the UK, it's raining and it's cold, and I'm halfway through cooking the kids' tea. But you know, I had to jump on because this is something I'm hugely passionate about, and it's the thing that also gets my goat the most, more than the metaverse, to be honest with you.
More than the metaverse. Interesting.
More than the metaverse, but yeah, CTV it's a blessing and it's a curse for anyone when they're talking about it.
I have to say something really quick, because this has nothing to do with CTV, but it speaks to my age and ignorance. So I was online, like doing something, and I saw this like event, and I was like telling my wife, like, I have to take my kids. This is amazing. She's like, where is it? And I looked into it. It was in the fucking metaverse. And I was like, wow, I'm old and not tuned into things. But anyways, pivoting back to CTV, I mean, I think there's this challenge, especially, in the programmatic world. And I also tell people, if they don't really understand it, go to one of your favorite publishers, look at their app ads file, and it looked like someone threw up thousands of the same line items over and over. And you create this sort of like, programmatic is supposed to be automated to some extent, it's supposed to be efficiency. And then you see these publishers, again, it's a problem from multiple sides. I would argue it's a big problem from the publisher side, where in a lot of cases, they're putting revenue above all else, or giving everyone access to the same inventory, and it just creates sales channel conflict. And like, I think it hurts the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I agree completely. You know, I think one of the things here is that publishers get a bashing, right? Publishers are asked to do absolutely everything on the lure of someone's going to turn up with a golden cow. Right. And once you're in the door, and once you've got a line in the ads text file, which you can still trade on without it, let's be honest. Right. You're in, you're never removed. Right. It's you know, it's like a cancerous cell that you just can't defeat. And unfortunately, that and the intertrading, and I personally have a distinct hatred towards SSPs for the land grabs that they went on to kind of capitalize on the CTV explosion. Right. And the problem there was they were plugging in anyone and everything. And really the responsibility sits with them to clean this up. They know who the bad actors are. They know what the bad supply is. They know about the dongles that are still showing ads. They know all about the screensavers. They know about the OTT devices that I don't consider to be CTV. They also know about the poor quality requests, and they could clean it up overnight. Yeah, but they won't, because buyers are still too ignorant by not looking into things enough and just going on base metrics. Oh, an impression was delivered. I'm not going to look into anything else about it. And that's kind of the key frustration. And I don't think there's enough power to push back on the SSPs, because they will just sit there and go, well, only one person complained. There's another 500 buyers who haven't. I'll just let that go because I'm getting the money. I'm delivering stuff to the publishers.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think finally, where the SSPs are in a place to solve for this, who's really pushed them, in my opinion, over the last 6 months, is the DSPs, is folks saying, hey, we're processing all this QPS, we're not profitable, you're plugged into the same supply through 20 SSPs, seeing the same stream 20 times, and essentially losing money on request, and they're pushing the hand of the SSP. I think it's always funny that, like, so I'm in Connecticut, and like, I'm not in a big city, so I see a Samsung ad 300 times a day. And I'm like, there's no way Sam's like, people know about frequency, like the fact that people still launch campaigns, there's two pieces. One, without frequency capping. So the issue with that is twofold. You're really limiting your reach. But I mean, some folks in the space have talked about this. Without frequency capping, you have all this phantom viewing that goes on from, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. So you see some campaigns, and when you look at metrics, they've served all their impressions to sort of 5 a.m. They're done for the day. They've blown their impression sort of quota for the day into non-attention viewers, so devices that are inactive. Like,
people don't look at the data enough. If you look at like Connecticut, it's something that has pained me. Connecticut, it's small. It's 3.4 million individuals. It's 1.1 million households, right?
Wow.
And only one Stephen.
There's only one Stephen. But if you're going like, I know these numbers off by heart because
awesome.
I'm fascinated by it. But I know, for example, when I've targeted a premium news channel, that in one day I've received 300 million requests for CTV for that one channel. The maths don't compute, right? 1.1 million households, 300 million requests. So you can't physically watch all of that on a 24/7. It's just not possible. And you look at the patterns of the data, it doesn't make sense. It's just too much arbitrage. I then also know a lot about the fraud side. That's kind of where I came from. So I know how to create a lot of this stuff as well. So I pity a lot of people who are dipping their toe in CTV, because on one side, they're being told by the SSPs and all these kind of breakout companies that CTV is great. It has huge potential. It can really help join the dots. We're talking about QRs being on the screen now and joining things up, and a lot more kind of third-party household data, being able to deliver valuable audiences. And that side is fantastic. But at the same time, 99% being robbed as soon as they come through the door. And that's the thing that really frustrates me.
And if I can jump in, I know this is very much your friend in dialogue, and I'm just sort of feeling a bit FOMO here. It's like, I think, and we had an agency friend who was on this chat last time, and it looks like she's not going to be able to join today, even if she wanted to, who, I think would be really interested in this, because part of this also, oh my God, it's drinks o'clock. Oh, I forgot. Oh,
sorry.
Yeah.
It's gone 7 here.
Like another part of the problem here, and I know there is at least one agency on this call right now, but like, I'll never stop recounting the story. When I took the team lead of for an agency client out for drinks once, and she wanted to be like really, really honest with me about her client's needs and how that actually could be a problem for the industry, as it feeds this kind of incest both ways, which is, we as an agency, she would say, like, want to do incredible things. We want to innovate, and we want to make sure that people see the ads and all this stuff. But the only thing the client ever asks for, despite being told they can ask for everything else, is, did it deliver? Did 100% of our impressions deliver? And that's all they care about. And I can't help but wonder, like, is that really all they care about? Or are they just so programmed into thinking that's the case? Or are they maybe not being told the whole story? Because you're right, like when you were just talking about things like QRs, I mean, remains a big, big, big topic. We've got 2 that are live right now, 2 more that are about to go live. And like we preach and lecture about how this really is still a work in progress. We cannot know how successful they're going to be yet for lots of other reasons. But this does create this sense of accountability and opportunity, right? Because we want brands to do better. Brands need to do better. Otherwise, we can't just assume they're going to carry on spending their money on this very expensive screen forever. But most of the ways that all of us are behaving are going to lead them at some point to the investment team saying, so what was the return on this? Like, and don't just say it was brand awareness, because unless you're going to prove to me brand awareness, like attention or whatever it is, which they're not going to want to do, because I mean, when GroupM and iSpot blew this shit out the water 3 weeks ago, I'm not trying to like give us too big a pat on the back, but Stephen and I raised zombie viewing, as we called it, 4 years ago, because we knew it was happening. And it took until 2022 and big enough people to say, hey, guess what? Up to 20% of all the impressions that have ever been served are probably going to a TV that's turned off. And while Stephen's always worried about like that 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. slot, I mean, personally, like I sometimes watch a bit of TV then, but I'm more concerned about the people who fucked off on holiday and left their, left their device on. Because then there were also practices by pubs that they would create sequentially longer and longer and longer ad breaks, depending on the device session, and all of that's the kind of thing that really needs to be known by everybody down to a brand level. And for as long as it's the agencies who are that direct contact with the brands, really, I think it is their responsibility, because they need to be more invested in the success of their brands, because all of the solutions are out there to make that success happen. It feels a bit chicken and eggy, maybe.
Yeah, and picking up on just that last bit is, if you go and compare it to the advantages on, OLV, right? We all know that, 80% of what you buy there is sound off already. So what is the point, right? So if we're standing there going, right, my average video might be $8 to $10 for premium stuff for an OLV, whether that's a breakout player, in-stream, pre-roll, whatever. Well, okay, so it's going to cost me double for something that's a principal screen in the home, but it's going to have the sound on if I get it right? You don't really watch the telly with the sound off.
Right.
Not always. Not always. Unless it's like something that you have massively on in the background, in which case, and this is something that we're obsessed with. And again, when we're not plugging and selling here, but how long has that device been running? And therefore, what's the value of that device, right? Stephen watches Unsolved Mysteries for 26 and a half hours a day, right? Because it's therapeutic, and sometimes the sound is turned on, and then when I tell him to, it's turned off. And so he can actually hear shit. But therefore, frankly, that is a lower quality impression than someone who's sitting down for their Saturday night movie experience, where they're actually invested. Yeah, and then so go ahead, and then we'll move on to the next thing, because I just realized the time. Go on.
I'd love to get your opinion on this, Will, because I know Roku had released earlier this year kind of a watermark product, right, to confirm that your ad actually ran. And if you look at, I'm not going to should have named names, but you know what I'm talking about. It's very much a walled garden in the CTV space, right? Like if you're a device manufacturer, Roku knows if the device is muted. Roku knows how long the device has been on. Do you think we get, I kind of know the answer to this, it's a loaded question, but do you think we get to a place in the space that the advertisers or big folks in the space who have muscle push that this information comes through? Because again, I would argue device manufacturers, OEMs, are keeping that information pretty close to the vest for their own purposes. Do you think the industry ever gets to a point to push that that becomes information and is commonplace in the bid stream?
Yeah, I think it's a lot like the washing powder analogy, right? Washing powder hasn't changed for the last 40 years, right? And it's exactly the same product, but suddenly they stick a red ball in it, or they change, or they stick some blue bits in it, right? But fundamentally, it stayed the same. But they've kind of eked it out because it gives another excuse, like a yo-yo effect, to kind of bring the buyers back. So be like, oh, spend's going down. Hey, we'll now tell everyone that actually we can now tell you if the device was off. To kind of lure back to us, right? That's my own cynical view of it. And it's certainly the sort of thing I would do if I was one of these players, is you don't want to release everything out there.
Right.
Just do enough to maintain your market share or to grow your market share. Why go out for everything? Because then you've got something in reserve for when someone else comes in with something. Oh yeah, we're already doing that. We've got that too. But there's another side, which is there's just so much information to the new buyer, right?
Yeah,
right.
It's just so much to onboard. They just sit there, and next thing they're just hearing word salad constantly, just like blah 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 blah. It's in one ear, out the other.
And that's actually a little bit why we do these sessions, because it is all word salad, but it's not always that people are clear about what's inside that salad. And also people have different recipes for what is called the same salad. And that's the big problem, which so eventually people just sort of give up, because it's you know what, I'm just going to make sure my client's happy. And the less I tell them, the less accountable I am, or whatever it is, and it's been the cause of, I think, what's cost us a lot of business, where we wanted to kind of overexpose in order to make sure that that the client has what they want. But that's not always in the best interest of, an intermediary here or there. Let's move on to another question. And Will, you're actually quite welcome to stick around up here if you want. You got that wonderful, I wish I had a nice English accent, it would just totally help them in business. But
Me too.
But stick around. And I think there's there are a couple of questions which I find particularly interesting that were asked ahead of this. And I think I kind of want to... Oh, go on.
What do you think of, just to sort of keep the flow? I know Samantha Dixon is here from Havas. She has a question around where ads run, which I think ties to supply.
That's what I was going to suggest next, actually. Yeah, 100%. And Samantha, you don't have to join. Like, I know you said you probably just rather listen, but your question was a good one. So Stephen, why don't you sort of launch that?
So if you want to join on stage, Samantha, just raise your hand. We'll bring you up. If not, I think you represent a really valid question, and I think there's been progress in the space. And I don't want to sort of call out Hulu, but I will a little bit. You have a lot of these premium platforms that are still existing in a walled garden state, and for the most part, I mean, if you buy Hulu programmatically at this point, you get very little exposure to where you run, what show you're in, what genre you're in, and I think there are other kind of big fast platforms that have started releasing genre information. So you know if you're running in a sports program versus a news program. The feedback we get in talking to publishers is that when they do release show information in the bid stream programmatically, people start cherry picking and they're gravitating their demand towards more premium content versus maybe less premium reruns of Unsolved Mysteries, which to each their own. But I think that presents a challenge twofold, right? So if you think of traditional television buying, you know what show you were in, you know what episode you were in, you know what ad break you were in, you know what minute, you have your as run logs, you know exactly what ran on traditional television. And I think as we talk to advertisers and agencies, that's definitely been a barrier and a challenge to moving dollars over, as people are used to this hyper level of transparency. And sometimes it's a black box. For many years, when you would do buys on Roku, I don't even think they would tell you what app you're running on. And one could argue they would have an incentive to run you on Joe's fishing channel at X CPM to them versus another channel to increase their economics to your disadvantage. So I think, again, all change has to happen through the buck, through the advertiser, through the agency. So we're getting there. But I think through some of the big guys, there's still a total lack of transparency. And if I'm paying a bunch of money as a TV buyer, like, to go from full transparency to nothing, like, that doesn't really work. That's my rant on that.
Yeah, but it's a good healthy rant. I mean, you know, it's like the people deserve to know, right, where these things are running. And again, it's this thing that you say that became like a bit of a tagline, which is, you know, all impressions are not created equal, right? Like, you know, you have content that is highly engaging, you have content that isn't. There's obviously a big move now towards contextual relevance as well, you know, and obviously, you know, we see our friends at Iris kind of crush it there, but there is a lot more to it than that, you know. But there's another thing that I would like to add as well to your question, Samantha, and it's sort of a bit of a segue from your question, but something that I think about a lot, and where you talk about like where your ads are running if you're not buying premium packages on Hulu, etc. Like, we often tell people that don't necessarily look first at the Hulus and the Discoveries and the premium inventory. Like, it's in a way, as long as you know that however and whoever is going to be in charge of distributing your, you know, your spots, as long as you understand and know exactly, and you trust them to be doing exactly what they're doing, I would suggest that you also make sure to focus more on potentially some of the smaller apps and channels that are out there, depending on the content, because that gives you two really important advantages. One is a lot of the more niche and independent content has significantly more engaged audiences. You know, like a really good example that Steve and I often give is like anime to Crunchyroll. Right? Like, you know, these people turn on those TVs and they watch Crunchyroll because they're obsessed with it, and they really will stay highly engaged even throughout the ad breaks. But also by sort of allowing yourself to expand away from these sort of banner like app names or channel names or streaming services, you're also massively increasing your audience. And the one thing that we find really, really interesting and enjoyable about that is how much more that allows you to focus on the household itself before you kind of cut the number of households down when it comes to like who you're targeting and how. You know, you like if you try to aim for the right people versus like the right streaming service, you could potentially find yourself opened up to a much bigger audience of even more appropriate people. It's definitely something to consider, especially also when you're looking at budgets and the premiums you're willing to pay. Stephen, is that fair?
I think it's fair, and just something I'll add, and maybe this is a nice bow tie on the sort of conversation here. I always thought it was interesting, and we talked about this, Fred, that, I mean, if you talk to, buyers 3 years ago, what are you buying on CTV? I'm buying Hulu, I'm buying Sling, I'm buying Roku. Well, what about Tubi, and what about Pluto? What about all these others? Well, that's all my client wants. And I think you get to this point that if you have proper data, I always encourage people to test inventory. Will appear here as we talk about. Every time you use the word inventory, Will shows up. I love it. So you need to test different inventory sources. Is one, I'm not saying Hulu isn't worth the price point, but premium inventory, premium price point. I hate the word premium now because everything is called premium. So if everything's called premium, nothing's premium. Just like when you board a plane, everyone's in zone 1 through 3. So like everyone has elite boarding. So like, I think that's always interesting to me, and appreciate it comes from the client. But like we always preach, context is really important. If you're trying to sell a Ford, get in front of people who are auto intenders. And I would argue there's big audiences outside of the Hulus, outside of the Slings, that are really, oh shit, I was gonna say premium again, I can't, but are high quality, but you're getting at a more efficient price point. So I think we've evolved from that, but like 3 years ago, people were like, yeah, oh, there's other stuff besides Sling and Hulu and Roku. It's like, yeah, there's tons of stuff and it's really cost efficient. So I think there's been so much progress made, but that also sort of, as someone so deep in the space, that always surprised me.
Yeah. Will, did you actually have something to add to this particular topic, or you just had a bit of FOMO and wanted to come back up?
No, I was just thinking I had to get the kids' tea out the oven. That was all.
Okay.
But I just wanted to add on what Stephen was saying there was actually, I think the new premium really is the richness of a request. I think that's actually the new premium. That's the differentiator when you're getting the same channel bundle within a household, but coming through 10 different sources. Really now, is it going to become a race to who's going to adopt OpenRTB 2.6 in, en masse first? And that will see a significant shift, I think, potentially within, let's say, the supplier world.
1,000%. And something that it's always interesting because we work with supply partners that was pulling teeth to get genre. We work with supply partners that give a show, episode, tons of information because they get the value of it. I always think it's interesting, and not that I want to like push traditional TV models on CTV. I always think it's interesting. If I was a supply partner right now, what I would be doing is I would be passing an ad pod position at different price points, right? Because if I have 6 positions in a pod, A and Z are more valuable than the ones in the middle. And also, like, again, where CTV I think falls short a little bit is not that I'm a fan of monetizing inventory at 3 in the morning, but if your floor in prime time or high attention viewership periods is $20, I don't think your floor at 3 a.m. should also be sort of $20. So I think there's some traditional metrics on TV that, again, you could easily add them in to correctly value your inventory. But I'm shocked that, like, if I'm watching a big streaming app that I won't name right now that has 6 breaks, like, again, I'm always paying attention to the 8 position. I'm gone by the middle of the break. There's a different value prop there. And I don't understand why people don't really look at it that way.
Yeah. And actually, like, I'd love for that to segue, just looking at the time, segue into another question we got asked about unsold inventory and Slate, or, the Be Right Back, right? Like its existence on connected TV, and why has such a poor job been done of it. I said to Stephen in our prep that I didn't want to ask this question because it was going to be very hard not to plug our own product. But what I'll say is, we agree, which is why we built a product to solve this problem. But the way I really want to address this is, why does it even still have to exist at all? And when we built the solution to just the static Be Right Back, it wasn't built with the long term in mind, because we believed that, like, there should hopefully one day be a level of efficiency where no one has in digital linear streaming any empty ad spots. If you think about it, right, most people's sort of sales waterfall starts with, this is going to be the direct sold hyper valuable client that we're going to sell to a big premium for. Then it's going to go into the programmatic waterfall where there's going to be 1 to 5 or 1 billion people who are going to have this merry clusterfuck in the middle, and then at the bottom, and sitting in the ad server, is going to be some promos and some tune-ins. Right. But the truth is that for most people, that still isn't enough. And when we were talking to OEMs about this particular problem, I just want to flag what is interesting is, they said that it's one thing to lose that impression opportunity and not make money from it, but that's not the expensive piece. The expensive piece is how viewers will churn away from the channel if that's the experience that they get. And so I think, again, sort of pivoting away from ad tech and more into just experience, I think this is something that like the channel owners are beginning to understand and are beginning to own, that they do actually really care about creating a better TV experience for people that means that they're going to stay. And so there are adoptions of things like Origin Slate, there we go, as well as people exploring other ways to get their brands on TV, period. And I think that that's what innovation teams and investment teams at agencies and brands should really start thinking about now. It's like, how else can we exist in the living room? How else can we make sure our presence is known? What can we do that's effective, that isn't just the 70-year-old playbook of just add, and then back to someone's movie? Like, there has to be better. And the answer is that there is better. It is out there. But as we were discussing just with a client yesterday, they said at the end of the course, Stephen, if you remember, someone said, like, and they're a big company, right? This one guy said, I feel really sorry for you. And we said, what? Okay, thanks. Why? Oh, because, you're an innovator in the space. And like, that's really difficult because no one really wants what you have. And I said, okay, well, rude, but you're not wrong, but the truth is that like this tide is turning. It's just a case of like, how do you as an agency or brand want to define innovation, and like, how much are you willing to risk to innovate on behalf of your client? Because there is nothing that you cannot do. It just takes opening up your imagination and tearing up that 7-decade-old playbook. And that's what I was thinking about when I saw that question from Jack. Stephen, is that reasonable?
I think it's reasonable. And like, you mean there's something in Ad Exchanger today that I think quoted less than 17% of dollars on CTV are spent on innovation, which is surprising, but not surprising. Yeah. And then you mean, I think it's interesting, you have all these companies in the CTV space, LinkedIn, that are throwing up everywhere that they want to innovate. And I would argue that 98% of people who want to innovate don't, and are full of SHIT. And the other point I wanted to make that you kind of like pushed upon is, I mean, if you look at the spectrum of people in the fast space or sort of streaming on linear on CTV, like you have some traditional players who launched a handful of years ago. They're running these 14, 18-minute ad loads per hour, which is very reminiscent of traditional TV. And then, I'll call these guys out. You have folks like Peacock, folks like Tubi, who are running sub 5-minute sort of ad loads per hour. So, and again, like, it plays into the thing you mentioned. The way people have compensated for that is, well, I'm going to blast people with ads, I'm going to deal with the churn, and I'm going to spend tons of money on Roku and other platforms getting new people in the funnel. I would argue, and I'm not an expert here, if you could significantly reduce churn, decrease your marketing budget, I think the revenue would tip in your favor. But I think there are new entrants who, which is really refreshing, revenue isn't their first metric, right? It's creative, amazing user experience, keep people, reduce churn, then make revenue from those great user sessions. And I'm hoping that will kind of like rub off and push some of the other people who have a 3-4x ad load to sort of come in line.
Yeah. And I know that we sort of made this a bit of a peacockathon last time. I think that they're a good example. They are like, they're gambling on creating something that is just more enjoyable. And, and actually this leads us into the final question perfectly, and then we're going to run out of time. But like, where was it, Stephen? The question, oh yeah, misleading headlines in the trades. I love that one, right? Because here's an example of a misleading headline in the trades. And it's almost like it's bloody lobbied. It's like, people love to talk in the trades about consumers love ads. Consumers love getting ads on TV. Can we just all be clear? No, they don't. No, we don't. Like, all of us here are all human beings. Are you going to tell me that you enjoy getting ads on TV? Now, we're all in the ad industry, so technically we should, because we're learning, right? But the truth is that we don't. Of course, we fucking don't. We want to watch our movie. What they're really trying to say is, some people might prefer getting ads to paying a heavy subscription.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
And that's, but that doesn't mean that you enjoy them. Right. And I think that is where what we are now beginning to understand, you know, that like we need to do better by these consumers, because we have always and will always be led by what the consumer is really prepared to do. And we don't know what's around the corner for us. We don't know if they're all going to suddenly vanish off tomorrow because there's another way for them to get their entertainment at home, you know, like, and so we need to stop going after the short-term buck, and we need to be looking at the long-term gain. And that needs to happen everywhere, from each end of the spectrum, from the pubs, the OEMs, the streaming services, doing the best that they can for, you know, like for the viewer's experience, for the agencies to make sure that like they are working with their brands to create something that is different, is original, is innovative and memorable. And then for all the people in between to make sure that we're not shoving the same shit down the throats of, you know, of a consumer 300 times a day. Because we did talk about this last time, that's not just like fraudulent, right, in a way, but it's also massively negatively impacting the viewer's perception of that brand, you know. And so like all of there's someone at every end of this queue that is accountable and should be held accountable. I think the problem is we need all those strings to pull together and to try and pull as one. And we won't, I don't think, for as long as like Wall Street is still ultimately guiding what it is that everybody wants in a way. Stephen, let's give you the last minute and then we'll let everyone go.
So ripped from the headlines, Netflix is launching an ad-supported tier, first quarter 2023. Clean slate, all eyes on Netflix. Will, what are your predictions? Do they get it right? How does it look? What do you think?
Yeah, to be honest, like a lot of things that everyone's touching on, like, do we really care? Whatever the solution is going to be, we're all going to jump on it anyway, right?
Right.
I think the opportunity for getting involved with Netflix, the potential data that they're sitting within, and the way that we can model audiences, and having a robust, that can always be questionable, but a robust tech partner behind them to help them do something. Whoever they go with is going to be an exciting opportunity.
But it's interesting because in the last few weeks, when there were all these predictions, so they go with FreeWheel, they go with Telaria, Magnite, and all these partners. It was funny. So there's a lot of commentary on LinkedIn, like, oh, if they go with Magnite, they'll have a sales team that can bring it to market. And I was like, they don't need that. Netflix is going to be a must-buy for advertisers, so they need strong tech pipes. They need that, like, just like I was saying, Roku, Hulu, and Sling, like, it doesn't matter what they do. And I hope they're smart enough and don't just jam 2-minute breaks, and they're innovative. A lot of their statements so far have really been kind of word salad, so you can't glean anything of it. But I mean, I agree with your point. You need the pipes. You need to make sure that you're managing. I know they were very concerned with data as they talk to partners, but it's frankly going to be a must buy. All these challenges of getting the right demand, like, people are going to be banging down their door. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what they come up with there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you. We're a couple of minutes over, so people have gone, but I think that's been brilliant. We've actually managed to cover a number of different questions. Will, thanks for joining us up here.
So thank you for having me. You know, it was a nice surprise to suddenly jump on.
Yeah, well, maybe you should just join us next time. You've got a good opinion, you've got a good perspective, and an even better T-shirt. So I think that's great. Thanks all for being here. Stephen, thank you for being blurry. Will, thanks for taking time out of the kids' tea. See you all soon.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye.
Cheers.